If you were only allowed to use one 2-second audio clip to help somebody else identify a car based purely on the sound alone, and your life depended on them getting this answer correct, this is the car I think you should use. What's up? Welcome back out to the collection. Today we're looking at yet another absolutely legendary JDM car. Now if you're new to the channel, I want to say welcome. My name is Charlie. I help share the cars across the social platforms. But if you have been following, you're probably very well aware of the number of legendary JDM cars in 458 Destroyers collection. We've got Paul Walker's personally owned R34 Skyline, R33 LM, 1000 horsepower R33. He's got top secret Supra, Veilside RX-7, and S-Tune R34, and a ton of others. But today we're not talking about Skylines, Supras, or RX-7s. Of course, by now you know I'm talking about the Lexus LFA. This is the Lexus LFA Nurburgring, and this is exactly what you get when one of the world's largest automotive manufacturers turns its engineering team loose with no constraints and says build the world's greatest supercar. Toyota spent more than a decade and over $1 billion developing the LFA, leveraging R&D from the Formula One team in the early 2000s, all the way up to running prototypes of the LFA in endurance races at the Nurburgring itself in 2008 and 2009. And from all of that effort, Lexus decided to only make 500 examples of this incredible car, produced from the end of 2010 till the end of production at the end of 2012. Making any LFA an incredibly rare car, but for those of you who are paying attention, you'll notice that this is not a regular LFA, this is an LFA Nurburgring. Now, before we talk about exactly what that means, I want to point out this pearl gray color. You see, when Lexus decided to make a Nurburgring edition of their LFA, they planned to only make 50 examples of it. However, as production went on, they ended up making 64 cars, but this is the only one in this color, and I have to say, it looks fantastic. Now, I do have to admit as well that the LFA is one of the few cars in my book that looks incredible in every color. Whether it's a crazy bright orange color like the thermal orange on the NSX Type S, or whether it's red, yellow, white, black, the LFA looks so good in every color. But I think particularly this looks really, really cool. And it's worth mentioning too that although we're very accustomed to the F badge on Lexus sports cars nowadays, this is the car that really tried to revamp Lexus and Toyota as a sports car manufacturer. But back to what separates the 64 Nurburgring edition cars from the base LFAs. Well, first, it's a $70,000 option on top of the already crazy $370,000 base price of a regular LFA. However, for that additional $70,000, you do get these beautiful magnesium wheels, stiffer retuned and more adjustable suspension, a load of carbon fiber aero from the front splitter, canards, side skirts, all the way back to this huge fixed carbon fiber wing at the rear that of course replaces the retractable wing on a standard LFA. And to help cope with the 30% extra downforce made by all of these aero changes, the engine gets a small 10 horsepower bump up to 562 horsepower. Now, all of those changes seem to pay off because in 2011, Chris Harris set a 7-minute 14-second lap time at the Nurburgring, breaking the lap record for the fastest production car ever around the ring. So if you were one of the crazy people to spend nearly $500,000 on a Lexus in 2012, at least you had the bragging rights of the fastest lap time at a track you probably never will visit. But lap times and records are completely irrelevant in my opinion when it comes to the LFA, because the one thing people know this car for most is that iconic soundtrack of that 4.8 liter V10 up front. So let's take a look at it a little bit closer. Now, I've actually got to set the camera down because in order to save weight, the hood's made out of carbon fiber, but there's not a strut to hold the hood up. There's just this carbon fiber rod that you have to completely remove and mount up yourself. So I'm gonna have to set the camera down. This is the 4.8 liter V10 heart of the LFA, and easily the biggest contributor in cementing the LFA in the book of all-time greats. The level of engineering and attention to detail that went into designing every single component of this engine is absolutely crazy, from the forged pistons, titanium connecting rods, titanium valves, all the way to the multiple scavenger pumps throughout the engine that help more efficiently cool all 15 quarts of oil, so it's only cooling the oil that's hot. And of course we have to talk about the engineering that went behind how this car sounds. Now, in order to make this car sound as good as it does, Toyota partnered with Yamaha, which you can actually see on the block back here. I'm not sure if you can see it down here, to help design this, what they called the surge tank, this intake manifold setup up here. And beneath this, we have 10 individual throttle bodies. Now, it's this entire system, the intake system, ITBs, and the exhaust itself, along with the 72-degree V 40-valve V10 that was specifically designed to give the firing order that they wanted, to get the sound that they wanted from this V10. All of these things put together give the LFA its signature sound. And I do think the engineering team accomplished their goal of creating one of, if not the single greatest sounding engine soundtrack of all time. Now, last but not least, before we take the car out for a drive, let's take a look at this incredible interior as well, because the attention to detail does not stop with the engine. There is attention to detail in every single piece of this car, and the interior is no exception. Now, there's one bad thing about the interior, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Now, I gotta say, the seats do look very different from traditional supercar sports car seats, but I've got to say that as soon as you sit in them, they make perfect sense. These are some of the most comfortable supercar seats I have ever sat in. Somebody put a lot of time into designing just the seat slider mechanisms, and it just goes throughout the entire interior. These are my favorite door handles I think I've ever seen on any car. They don't need to be this fancy, but dude, they're just so cool. Carbon fiber on top of the door panels, carbon fiber steering wheel, red leather. It's just, everything is just so perfect. Not a ton of visibility. The windshield is quite raked and quite low, and of course in 458's cars, the tint is super dark. It's just such a cool place to be. On either side of the dash, you have our drive modes over here, and your headlight switches over here. They're just, everything is just so satisfying to use, especially the paddles. These are some of my favorite tactile paddles, and I have to say, give it to Lexus. Lexus has the award of the absolute best indicator selector and the wiper selector of any car ever. But as incredible as everything else is in this car and this interior, I've got to say the infotainment system is a huge letdown. You've got this little mouse trackpad thing used to select everything from the AC to the radio to navigation, everything. But I mean, who needs to use any of this stuff anyways, right? That's probably the last thing you're gonna be messing with if you're handed the keys to an LFA. And speaking of keys, despite the fact that there is an engine start button here on the steering wheel, like we just showed a minute ago, there is still a key that you still have to use to start the car. And talking about some of the cool, iconic interior features of the LFA, of course, I'm sure everyone at this point has seen it. Lexus has carried it out through some of their modern cars, but you can push the switch right here. The screen is digital, but there's still a physical ring around the tack that moves with the gauge. That's so cool. I love it. Now, I feel like I've talked enough about the LFA up to this point, so let's fire it up, get it out on the road, and show you exactly why this car is so special. Welcome everyone to the LFA Nurburgring Edition. And I have to say, this is by far one of my favorite cars to drive in the entire collection. Just listen to that noise. God, nothing makes the sound that the LFA does. The 4.8 liter V10 in this car, it is not at all an overstatement to say this is one of the best internal combustion engines ever made. It is impossible to drive an LFA and not have a huge smile on your face. You see, when this car was launched, it cost $375,000. That is a crazy amount of money, especially coming from a brand like Lexus, who had never built a car like this before. They had never built a supercar before. And to try to find a customer who's willing to spend nearly $400,000 on a Lexus over, say, a Ferrari or a Lamborghini is absolutely crazy. And I think that's obviously the biggest contributing factor to why this car didn't sell as well as they wanted it to, obviously, when it was launched. And even at that crazy price, they still lost money on every single one they sold. Just for perspective, at the time, the 458, I believe it retailed somewhere in the low 200s, $220,000, $230,000. For Ferrari's flagship front-engine V12 supercar, the 599 at the time, that MSRP'd at just over $300,000. So at $375,000, this was significantly more expensive than a 599. And also keep in mind, that's before we talk about the $70,000 Nurburgring package, putting this car at nearly $450,000. But even just putting around in fourth and fifth, third gear at 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 RPM, which is nowhere near the red line, it just makes you smile. What a machine. What an incredible, incredible machine. Now, another really interesting thing about this car, and it's something that a lot of people may dislike about the LFA, and that's the transmission itself. You see, this is an old school, single clutch, automated manual setup, which is why I'm not launching the car today, because I don't want to be responsible for telling 458 Destroyer that his LFA needs a new clutch because I launched it. But the transmission does really well when you're driving, but obviously if you leave it in the most leisurely auto normal drive mode and leave it in automatic, it is a bit hesitant, I guess it feels, between the gears. Obviously it's nowhere near as snappy as a dual clutch setup is, but I think it gives this car so much character. This car only makes 550 or so horsepower and does 0 to 60 in like 3.5 or 3.6 seconds. It will top 200 miles an hour, but all of those facts are irrelevant. By today's standards, this car is nowhere near the top. And from where I'm sitting, here in the driver's seat, I could not care less. Well, I hope you have enjoyed listening to the LFA as much as I have enjoyed driving this car on this beautiful afternoon, the last day of 2023. If you're new to the channel, I want to say welcome. What's up? My name is Charlie. I help make content with the cars across the social platforms, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If you haven't checked those out, make sure you do. We're posting content all the time. We've got tons of new stuff planned for 2024. But today, I'm just going to enjoy the rest of this beautiful 60-degree sunshine afternoon in this absolutely phenomenal car. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. If you liked it, make sure you like the video. Drop a comment down below what you think is the best sounding car of all time, because I think I found my answer. It's probably an LFA Nurburgring. And with that, I'm gonna get back to driving. I will catch you guys in the next one.